All right, thank you. On behalf of my colleagues, I certainly want to thank LA84 for this invitation. What we're going to do here is to have a conversation. All of us have, in various ways, have really been strong advocates for health and mental health, and you will hear the stories and the journey of each of my colleagues. At some point, we're going to turn it over to the audience and ask you what sorts of insights and takeaways that you have. I will start the conversation. As was mentioned, I'm currently serving as a director of the Mental Health and Wellness Program for the National Basketball Players Association. It's an inaugural program. We're looking to be the preeminent, full-body, comprehensive mental health and well program for professional athletes. My journey here has been varied. Pertaining to this particular issue, I worked a lot with elite athletes, with entertainers. In my role as a psychologist and as a clinician, really have had the honor and privilege of listening to stories and journeys. Liz Farrell, woman who spoke with us just before lunch, I really need you to evoke what she and her colleagues were saying. She had a journey. You saw tattoos on her arm. What I'm wanting you to consider is that she and many others like her, perhaps some of you in the audience, have had experiences that have left what I label as invisible tattoos on you that are indelibly etched based on the experiences that you've had. I've had the privilege over the years of understanding that, seeing that, and that's going to shape the program that we are going to provide for the active players in the National Basketball Association. I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we'll engage in a discussion. You will hear from them what they are currently doing, how they are using their platform as advocates for health and mental health.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Parham. My name is Chris Borland. I was an All-American linebacker at Wisconsin and third-round draft pick of the 49ers in 2014. Went on to have a fairly successful year with the 49ers, led the team in tackles, was named to the All-Rookie team and named to the Pro Bowl as an alternate. All the while, I was looking into the ramifications of repetitive brain injury. I'd had a concussion history. The literature was growing while I was in college and then in my year in the NFL, and ultimately decided that after my rookie season, I was going to walk away from football. Now, I was naive to the attention that my story would garner. I anticipated being on the ticker of ESPN for a week, if that, and it grew into something unexpected. Was thrust into a role as an activist, and at first, honestly, I didn't want to do it, but over the past 3 years, I've been involved in a variety of projects, from advocating for banning youth tackle football, to helping former college and pro athletes who are in dire need, to novel studies into meditation and its benefits for those who suffered traumatic brain injury. So it's been a really interesting journey. I'm thrilled to be here today. I've really been excited to meet everybody on the panel, and I'm excited for this conversation. It's needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Tommy John. I've been in performance and healing for over 17 years. I am the son of the Tommy John from the Tommy John surgery. In all of that, we've seen that the majority of those surgeries bearing our name are happening in just under 60% are happening in 15 to 19-year-olds. As if we could say that baseball was the only thing being affected, ACLs are a public health concern. They're epidemic proportions, concussions, which Chris is going to get into, stress fractures in the spine. There's all sorts of abnormalities and these epidemic of injuries in our youth. I was a part of that problem where I was making a lot of money doing private baseball lessons in the winter when these kids should be playing other sports, should be playing outside, doing things other than specializing in their one sport. So I shut down my baseball school and went back and got a chiropractic degree so that I could move up the food chain and help more people, help people become their best selves. And so right now it's heartbreaking because in my practice, it's bigger than arms, knees, and backs. I've got kids coming into my office medicated for anxiety and depression because of their inability to perform in their youth sporting experience. And they're 10 and 11 years old. So it's bigger than the physical. Everybody's looking for a finger to put in this dam that's overflowing. So is it a pitch count? Is it a helmet? Is it controlling the amount of time we play? It's so much bigger than all that. And so if I can use my father and I, he's sick that his name's attached to something that's happening more in kids than professionals. 44 years ago, he didn't believe that we'd be talking about children having his surgery bearing our name. But if there's some way that we can set up to put the power back into the hands of the parents, because youth is where the secret is going to lie, and then we'll see Major League Baseball, the NBA, ML, every other above that. But we got to start with kids.
Thank you.
My name is Metta. World Peace is. I'm honored to be here, and it's always good to give back and be a part of the community. Thank you for having me on this panel. I've been affected by mental health since a kid, growing up in Queensbridge projects. Most of it's been from the violence and the drug dealings and different things like that was going on in my communities and in my household. And then as I got older, I kind of understood that my life is going to be in my own hands. I understood kind of where my depression and anxiety was coming from. I learned a little bit more about myself. It made me want to give back, to the kids. Got the championship ring in LA 2010, raffled the ring off, and gave all the money for mental health agencies for mental health awareness. And I'm still going down this journey of giving back. I think the youth is important. Sports is absolutely important, in my life, and I have a lot of things I'm doing with youth sports also. And not just sports and mental health education, but also parenting and partnership is important. The stronger the family, the less the stress you have, the less anxiety you have. A lot of the kids growing up and going to college, playing college sports, high school sports, whatever the case may be, a lot of dysfunction in the household, a lot of separation in the household. So that's something that's also important to me. I think our kids are learning everything else. They're learning about drugs, guns, bitches, and hoes, and all that stuff. So it's true. But it's time to teach them about also parenting, the importance on parenting, the importance on partnership, add that to youth sports, add that to the schools. And so that's my mission now, and I'm happy to be here.
My name's Riley Tindol, and I'm a former defensive end at Vanderbilt University. And I kind of became an activist by accident. I don't know if you can, but through my experiences at the collegiate level with mental health specifically, and how it affects those of us who do participate in sport, and how it is such an unaddressed problem. Like, by sharing my story, I kind of, that's how I got into it. And I just wanted to come speak today just about how one of the major problems that most of the athletes and future athletes and our young athletes will face is their mental health as well as physical health. And let's take the 1,300 universities and colleges that are around the U.S., and every one of them has a sports staff, training staff that is there to help them recover as quickly as possible so that they're able to play again. But unfortunately, that there are less than 35 universities that have sports psychologists on staff, and it's staggering because we always talk about mental as well as physical, and if we really aren't backing that up with the support within sport, then I think we're doing an injustice to all the athletes and future athletes. I think that we need to put a more focus on that.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you're doing some very good work, and you are to be commended for that. Could you say a little bit more about your journey, and was there a pivotal moment in time where it really clicked that you have a bigger purpose other than the sport or the activity in which you were engaged? Any of you can?
Yeah, I can start. Immediately after I quit, there was really this firestorm of media attention. There's a lot of arguments around football and the legitimacy of brain diseases and whether you should play or watch or support. And I kind of got bogged down in that, and it was very antagonistic and adversarial. I made a pivot to do more positive work. So I connected with a researcher at my alma mater named Richie Davidson, a positive psychologist and neuroscientist, and said, let's just do something for players that's universally good. No one can argue with this. The worst side effect to meditation may be that you waste 10 minutes. The pharmaceutical industry and a lot of people have a lot of money at stake for former players' health. And so to focus on something positive, I think that's really why we're all here. A lot of these issues with mental health, with chronic use injuries, have to do with the professionalization of youth sports, driven by this really intense competitive nature of getting to the next goal or accomplishment, when in reality, it should be a positive experience. We can be proactive and prevent these problems by focusing on what sports are supposed to do for us. So for me, that point when I transitioned and worked with Professor Davidson was when I realized that this platform I have could be used to do something wholly positive and not just focus on the fight that takes place largely on Twitter, but everywhere in the sports world.
Chris is absolutely right. The youth sports industry is a $15 billion a year industry and growing. I think that numbers were a couple years ago. And it is. It's a chase to be professional. It's a chase to have a scholarship. The average scholarship, I think, offered is like $19,000, but some of these households are putting in $120,000 over 10 years. And really, who's paying the price are these children or these kids. And that was the tipping point for me, was again, as I performed over 11,000 baseball lessons. I was doing rehab and training in the mornings and then sports performance training in the afternoons and evenings. And it was, there was a fever behind the most mundane side to what I was doing, which was the baseball lesson. But there were kids coming in suffering from things that 40, 50, 60-year-olds should be suffering from or could come back and heal from. And there was just something bigger than that for me, and that's when I closed down the school, went and got a chiropractic degree. 2 years before I go to chiropractic school, my brother, who I bear on my forearm, passed away battling mental health issues. Now, he was my best friend. When I got to chiropractic school, the first class you take is the history of chiropractic, and the greatest results in the history of chiropractic historically were for mental health. And I'm like, this is so, like, we don't choose anything. Like, it finds us if we listen enough. And so I have published a book because I published it in June. It is a survival guide for parents. But when you read it, we're all human athletes. When we play sport, it's such a small sliver of our life, but what we're doing in that small sliver is affecting our lives profoundly down the road. And the decisions we're making, parents were coming in and we're like, okay, I'm so glad I found you, great. Now what do I do? And they're just helpless. They're terrified. They're scared of their sport. They're scared they're not doing something right. And that shouldn't be, like Chris was saying, this should be something that's fun, something that encourages grit, persistence, teamwork, respect. It's unbelievable that to provide and put it back into the hands of the parents so they don't have to leave their houses thinking there's a special facility or a single person that's going to save their child so that they don't have to rehab from their childhood. And so that's where it's trying to empower the families as a whole instead of mom brings in son or daughter, dad's out, grandma's out, everyone's together. Like I said, we're human athletes. Some are going to celebrate the score of getting up and down off the toilet without pain. Some surviving a fall, some making a team.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a great panel about youth sports. I know we all have different reasons for being here. But just speaking on youth sports and kind of where I started to focus on the parenting, and kind of similar to what you were saying, that there's so much pressure, on the kids. I mean, how can you make their experience better? And I go back to the parenting. The school systems, essentially for me, are the parents, because a lot of our kids grow up separate from the father, in my experience. So we have to, for one, we got to pay the teachers more, because we ask the teachers to be. I mean, you're asking the teachers to be a parent to your child. You see on Instagram or social media all the time how the kids just attacking the teacher. Yeah. And the teacher is going there taking the stress off all these kids. So we have to put the school system in position to teach the teachers how to be parents to kids who don't have parents. And then, like I said earlier, I kind of made the comment about the disrespectful terms that we use towards women, myself included. I use those terms also. But our kids are learning all these terms. We need to teach them other things. What about, instead of, what's the point of having a master's degree if you have anxiety and depression and you don't know how to deal with it? So they got to get these kids early, teach them the importance on being a good partner to your significant other. I grew up thinking that's not important, and that takes a toll on athletes. As you can see, 85% of the athletes are getting divorced when they leave the sport, and even, not even just athletes. It's just in America in general, that number's high. But that causes a lot of stress. You come to practice carrying something that happened with you at home, you carry it into practice, carrying the stress from practice back at home. And you don't really know how to deal with those stressful situations. But it does start at youth sports. We got to give our kids different tools. I said partnership and then parenting. A lot of our kids, they don't have no reference point, so they don't know how to, they didn't see a mother and a father in a household together. So when they have that child, they don't even know how to raise the child. So all that stuff is very important in youth sports. I know we talk about the trophies and all this other stuff, getting a championship ring and trying to make the NBA, but I think we got to be more responsible and give our kids some more tools on parenting and partnership.
Riley, thank you.
What was it? Sorry, one more time.
Just a pivotal moment. I know you're doing a lot of good work. Was there a pivotal moment in time where you said, this is my calling?
Well, specifically, why I stopped playing football was due to mental health issues. And that was hard. To go from waking up and doing something every single day to that no longer being like my life. And I think at the end of that, it ended because of I have bipolar disorder, and that's very common, especially with a lot of people that I've talked to throughout this, and like finding that commonality. So like the pivotal point was I survived my third suicide attempt in college, and I found strength through that through a documentary called Alone in the Game. And I had been reached out to by other athletes, LGBT athletes, who suffered from mental health issues. And I felt so alone, but then I realized what a massive problem this is. And that I was lucky enough to be at a university, one of the universities that does have a sports psychologist on staff. And I think without which I wouldn't be alive without her. And that's why I wanted to come here and speak to you personally, just because of how important mental health is to each and every growing athlete. And it's important that we harp on this and we talk about growing mind, body, and soul, but we have to be there to listen, to be able to engage in dialogue and have those hard conversations and talk about things that are uncomfortable, but also being there and finding that commonality.
One of the things I'm hearing all of you say is that mental health and physical health aren't a part of life, they are life. And it's important to really learn tools to navigate both. I'm also hearing that in all of your trajectories, the pivotal point was when you discovered you as a person and the person and the others around you, who often go to these private spaces screaming for help. Nobody's listening. So you bury it, develop that chip on your shoulder to keep moving. But comes a point of recognition where you really have to sort of move past that and see a bigger world out there. Could you say more about that in terms of where you see yourself going from here? Now that you have this insight, your focus is on the person behind the performer. Where do you see yourself taking that message as you move forward in your advocacy?
Well, to piggyback off of what Riley was expressing, connection. I think that was my awakening, was that I was central to a really divisive issue, and found in a broader sense that there's far more connection, and a very strong connection, if I were to go about it in another way. I think in terms of mental health, in terms of the betterment of well people, even if you don't have a diagnosis, finding connection. We live in a really divisive country, really divisive political climate at the moment, but I think we're all, essentially human and have far more in common than what divides us. So whether you're advocating on brain injury or mental health, finding like-minded folk and recruiting allies rather than sowing division. That's my general focus. How it manifests, I don't know. I've found that as I'm walking that path, there's more and more people that think that way, and it's restorative. I was really depleted in that divisive world, and I feel refreshed every day, seeking connection.
Wonderful. Any of you?
That's a great point. I think my biggest thing in my office, with myself, with the book, with everything, it's just about empowerment. It's almost like just, I have a saying in my office, because people will come in, can you fix me? No, I'll be alongside you. I always say, I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs you leave behind, but in all seriousness, you are going to heal you. You are the main player in this whole thing. And it's scary, but then it's also kind of a badass feeling when you realize, wait, I've got this within inside me, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. 86-year-old with osteoporosis and MS, or a 9-year-old with developmental disorders. Everybody's all on the path to being a better version of yourself than yesterday. And you will always adapt to any situation that you're at. That's the body's main job, is to adapt to its environment. If it doesn't adapt, it stops. That's why we sweat. That's why we have fevers. That's why we shiver. That's why we vomit. There's all these keys to adaptation. So moving forward, it's trying to empower whole families so that they infect whole families, because the majority are infecting another way, and they're going another route. And it's almost like I sat at a restaurant, I couldn't believe, for 42 minutes, and I timed it because I'm a nerd, but I timed it. It was 42 minutes, and these two women kept talking about what was wrong with them, their diagnosis that they've been labeled with, the medications they were taking, the therapies that worked and didn't work. It had nothing to do with the beautiful food in front of them and the fact that the sun was setting. It was coming through the sports were on the TV. There was nothing. It was 42 minutes about what's wrong, and they loved talking about what's wrong with them instead of what's so right about everything. And that's the biggest thing, especially with kids, because it breaks my heart how much we can learn from kids, but how much we just shut them down. A 1-year-old is a master deadlifter. For all of us who have ever deadlifted before, I was doing a talk at a facility once, and I'm not kidding you. My buddy's little 1-year-old was running around, and I stopped it, and I said, whoa, watch this. It was a 4-kilogram medicine ball. That's 8.8 pounds. She, barefoot, set up, goes down, tried to grab the top, and realized that there was no leverage in the top of the ball. Goes down to the middle, and I was looking at her back. Her back was rounded, which we would all be like, right before she goes, holds her breath to support her spine, knew this, and then flattened her back and stood up to a perfect deadlift, and then dropped it and did it again. She was doing sets of 4. Who gave her sets of 4? Within us is this perfect thing that just wants to express itself. And that is my main mission, is trying to get those people to affect others, to infect others in a more positive route, because being empowered about your state of function is an unreal thing. And to talk about everything, looking at my brother's eyes, 3 days before he passed, he lost hope in the approach and the system, the way it was set up. They don't effing know what they're doing, quote unquote, and he doesn't swear. And I had to support something I was very much against, because if he thought his big brother doubted his approach to healing, game over 3 days prior to. So once he lost hope, that was it. And he fought for 4 years. So what about if we could get it all to where we look ourselves, I got this. I can do this. What are you going to do tomorrow? I'm going to play soccer. What are you going to do in 10 years? I have no idea, but I know I'm going to get it. I'm going to do it. And that's where I see moving forward with all of us here.
Yeah. Before we move on, I want to add a piece here, because I want all of the audience to really make sure that they're getting this. The best place to hide is in plain sight. Panelists so far have really underscored that if you take time just to stop and reflect and see what's in front of you, you begin to discover a lot of energy that is there. Something Dr. John just said struck another chord. If I were to ask all of you, does the sun rise and set? My guess is you'd say, of course. To get to the end of the story, the facts are is that you never have seen the sun rise in the east or set in the west. What you've been looking at is an illusion. The illusion that something's going up and going down. So we believe at nighttime when we don't see the sun, it's not there. The truth of the matter is the sun is always there, as is the access to the talent and genius that we have as healers, as advocates. And so it's about how do you create an environment allowing kids, all of you, to discover the innate genius and talents that you have. I just wanted to throw that in because I appreciate the vulnerability, the sense of care, and the sense of coming into your own as a model for what others can now do. Metta and Riley, what about you? What can you now take into as you continue to advocate?
I think, you get older, you evolve, and like you said earlier, building allies, it's not just about my mission, or my 501c3, or my business, It's about, when you're giving back, it's about how can you help, the next person that's giving back? How can I help your cause? And I'm just learning about, Dr. John's cause also. And then how can I implement what I'm doing into what these gentlemen are doing? And sometimes, in this world, I think you said earlier, the kids get so caught up in individualism, I guess. And how can you teach them to work together, to collaborate? Right now, you see basketball as an individual sport, so you'll see all sports. You'll see that one player getting all the attention or getting all the marketing. What about marketing the team, like how the San Antonio Spurs, how they approach the game? You'll see their whole starting five in a commercial. So we get a lot of kids, having that anxiety because they want to be the best, and when they're not number one or even number two, they become stressed. So you see Michael Jackson, he wanted to be number one so bad. He did anything it would take to be number one. He put himself through a lot of stress. So that's why I'm big on just collaborating. I really enjoy being here. I kind of stopped doing a lot of work with my 501c3 and started to attend more events because I found out that I was able to make a bigger impact. Being here, speaking in front of in front of all you beautiful people, and you're gonna maybe take my message and maybe do something with it. And then I go to another event, and then people are like, oh wow, I'm gonna do something with that. So I found myself, the more I can collaborate, the more it will affect children. And you only have so much time in a day. So that's what I kind of take from everything and where I'm going, kind of moving forward.
Excellent. Riley?
I'd just like to say that, we're athletes as health activists, but everyone in here should be worried about their own health and their own well-being, as well as athletes, you know what I'm saying? Everyone needs to be worried about their own health, and that's something that we can take away from this is health lasts from when you're born until the day that you die. And we always want to promote better and I'd say that we should be our own advocates. Everyone in here should be an advocate for health, for physical and mental health, and because sport only lasts for so long. So we want to be as healthy as we can going into the sport and maintain that level of health and provide for those athletes during that time, because we want them to be as healthy, if not healthier, whenever they come on the other side of sport. We never want sport to take away or to shorten anyone's health or degrade it. We want to be there to support all of these young people and these young athletes and promote them in every way that we can. And I think by supporting physical and mental health is how we do that. And we don't use athletes and we don't, use their health as an expenditure. We promote it because that lasts long after you end sport. And that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Well, as we begin to wind down, it's clear to me that there's a lot of passion, a lot of insight, and a lot of energy to move forward. I think we can't talk about advocacy unless we talk about the larger context of society, the politics, current political system, sexual identity issues, race, class. How do you navigate all of that? Do you have one or two tips about what you are doing to negotiate those spaces in order to get your message out?
For me, I think aiming to understand before feeling compelled to have an opinion. Cultivating some comfortability around ambiguity. You don't have to have the answer. Everybody else knows something you don't. And so being perpetually curious, relying on others and learning. It's an easy time to judge. I mentioned Twitter earlier, and it just seems like with the man who's in office and with a lot of the discourse in our country, it is so angry. And I think we've made an art form of talking past one another. So I think aiming to understand, being curious and connecting is a way. A lot of those problems or those differences melt away. I mean, we all come from different backgrounds, have different stories and experiences, and we're up here together, sharing a similar message. I think that's true for most people. So,
Anybody else in the few minutes we have left?
Well, I think you talked about politics a little bit, and it does affect the child. I remember when I was young and they had the war in Iraq, I was very scared. I was like 12 or 13. I'm like, it affected me. I felt like the world was going to end. And then when you carry that anxiety with you for anything, you can, maybe the next day you have a kid bumps into you and then you just lash out because you're carrying, this tension. I know I was taught with my psychologist that you carry tension in your jaws and you can carry it in your hips, you can carry it in your shoulders, and with the political system now, it is a little bit of tension out there. It could affect the youth, but the stuff we're doing today needs to be publicized also. I wish we had the head of Twitter putting this on the front page. They only publicize the bad, but this is a really positive thing, and not a lot of people is going to know about this unless we all tweet, right? So hopefully Instagram and Twitter and Facebook could put
One of the
this
things
on
I'm
the front page.
hearing, one of the things I'm hearing all of you say prompts a mantra that I teach students. A person will never see their reflection in running water. It is only when the water is still will their reflected image begin to emerge. And all of you have had a moment of stillness and reflection to really take forth a message that needs to be talked about. You need to have ongoing advocacy. It reminds me of a second mantra. If you want to lead the conductor, the orchestra, the maestro needs to turn his or her back to the audience. They have to leave out the noise coming from the world, coming from our own selves. And all of you have been wonderful conductors. Can we give our panelists a round of applause?